Prepare for the meeting. Chosen one. They're coming without your knowledge. I am speaking to you now because something is already moving toward you. And if you ignore this moment, you may miss what I have prepared for your life. This is not random, and this is not distant. It is close, and it is real. And I am telling you clearly that a meeting has been set in motion that will not wait for your comfort or your readiness. You are being positioned for an encounter that will shift the direction of your path. And you must understand that this is why your spirit has been restless and your heart has been sensing change. I have allowed certain delays and certain silences so that this exact moment could arrive. And now you are standing at the edge of something you cannot fully see yet, but must be ready to receive. Type 111. Right now, everything feels normal. Nothing dramatic. Nothing clearly shifting. No big signs, no obvious doors opening. Just the same rhythm, same environment, same kind of days. And because of that, a part of you has quietly started to believe. Maybe nothing is really happening right now. But that assumption, that nothing is moving, is where the mistake begins. The meeting that is coming does not need preparation in the natural sense. It requires alignment in your spirit, and that is what I have been doing within you. You may feel unprepared, but I have already prepared what is necessary inside you, and that is why you must not doubt yourself at this moment. What is coming will recognize what I have placed within you, even if others could not see it before. Pause for a moment and show your faith by liking this video, because this step of agreement matters more than you realize. I am not speaking of an ordinary meeting. This is not just a simple interaction or a passing moment. This is a divine connection that has been arranged beyond what you can control or predict. And it will happen without warning, because I do not want fear or overthinking to interfere with what I am about to do. If you had more time, you might try to change yourself, hide your truth, or step back out of uncertainty. But I am removing that option so that you can walk into this moment exactly as I created you. You do not need to perform. You do not need to impress, and you do not need to force anything, because what is meant for you will recognize you without effort. But look at your life right now, honestly, without trying to make it sound deeper than it feels. Nothing has that sharp edge of change, no sudden message that shifts your direction, no unexpected call that interrupts your routine, no moment where you pause and think, this is different. It's just the same flow repeating itself in slightly different forms. The same kinds of conversations that don't really go anywhere. The same environments, the same roles, the same energy cycling back around. Days blend into each other so smoothly that it's hard to point at anything and say, this is where something started. And because nothing feels urgent, nothing feels like it's building toward anything significant, your mind quietly adapts to that rhythm. Not loudly, not consciously, but subtly, over time. You stop scanning for change. You stop expecting interruption. And without even realizing it, you settle into a quiet, almost automatic conclusion. Maybe nothing is really happening right now. That thought right there, that quiet, almost invisible assumption that nothing is happening, is exactly where the real mistake begins. Because you've unknowingly defined change as something that has to look obvious, something that announces itself clearly enough for you to recognize it in real time. But that's not how most shifts actually enter your life. They don't arrive as big, dramatic moments you can point to. They slip in through interactions. Small, easily overlooked exchanges that don't feel important when they're happening. A conversation you didn't plan to have. Maybe one you almost ignored or tried to end quickly. A person you weren't expecting to meet, who doesn't look like anything you've been waiting for. A situation that, at first glance, feels random, slightly inconvenient, or even irrelevant to where you think you're going. And the problem is, you've trained yourself, without realizing it, to filter your attention based on intensity. If something doesn't feel significant immediately, you downgrade it. You half listen. you stay mentally somewhere else. You treat it like background noise. And in doing that, you miss the exact layer where real change begins. Quietly, indirectly, without ever announcing its importance up front. So when something important shows up looking ordinary, you don't recognize it. It doesn't trigger anything in you. It doesn't feel urgent, doesn't feel rare, doesn't feel like the kind of moment you've been waiting for. So you treat it like everything else. You respond casually, almost on autopilot. You give half your attention, half your presence. Maybe you're thinking about something else while it's happening. Maybe you're already planning your exit from the conversation. Maybe you're just going through the motions because nothing about it feels significant yet. And that's the danger, because the weight of a moment is not always revealed in real time. By the time it becomes clear that it mattered, that there was something different about it, something you should have leaned into more, the moment has already passed. The door didn't slam shut. It just quietly moved on without you. Not because it wasn't meant for you. Not because the opportunity wasn't real, but because it didn't match your expectation of how something important should feel when it arrives. You were looking for something louder, clearer, more defined. And because of that, you overlooked what came in a form you weren't prepared to respect. This is not a new pattern. It's something you can see even in Scripture. Think about the moment in 1 Kings 19:11-12, where Elijah is waiting for God to move. He's not in a calm, neutral place. He's coming out of exhaustion, pressure, and confusion, trying to understand what comes next. And in that state, he's expecting something clear, something unmistakable. Then everything starts happening in ways that look like God should be in it. A powerful wind tearing through the mountains, an earthquake shaking the ground, a fire passing by. Each one dramatic, intense, impossible to ignore. The kind of events that demand attention and feel significant in the moment. But the text makes something very specific clear. God was not in any of those. And that's the detail most people overlook. Because if you were there in that moment, your instinct would be to lock onto the biggest, loudest thing happening. You would assume that whatever carries the most intensity must carry the meaning. But Elijah is forced to confront something different. After all the noise, all the movement, all the obvious displays, what actually carries the presence is a still, quiet whisper. Something so subtle it doesn't demand attention. It requires it. And think about what that means. It means if Elijah had only been focused on what felt powerful, what felt urgent, what felt undeniable, he would have completely missed the very thing he was waiting for. That's the pattern. The expectation was built around intensity, but the reality required awareness. And that's exactly where you are right now. You're not in a place where nothing is happening. That's the illusion. What's actually true is far more precise. You're in a place where something subtle is already positioning itself to enter your life, but you're not expecting it in the form it's going to take. You're scanning for something obvious, something that clearly separates itself from everything else, something that announces, this is it. But what's approaching doesn't carry that kind of signal. It moves quietly, almost blending into your normal routine. And that's exactly why it's dangerous to rely on expectation right now. Because that mismatch between what you think it should look like and what it actually looks like is where people miss the very thing they were waiting for. You see this pattern clearly in 1 Samuel 16, when the prophet Samuel is sent to anoint the next king. He walks into Jesse's house already carrying an internal expectation of what the chosen one should look like. When he sees Eliab, the oldest son, strong, impressive, outwardly fitting the image, Samuel immediately assumes, this must be him. It feels right. It looks right. It matches the expectation. But that's exactly where he's wrong, because the instruction he receives cuts directly against that instinct. God does not see as man sees. What looks significant on the surface is not where the decision is being made. One by one, every obvious choice is rejected. Every option that fits the expectation fails. And then David is brought in, almost as an afterthought, not even considered at first. Left out in the field, no dramatic entrance, no signal that this is the moment everything shifts. From the outside, nothing about that moment looks like a turning point, but it is. And if Samuel had stayed locked into his expectation, if he had only trusted what looked important, he would have completely missed the one who was actually chosen. That's the tension you're standing in right now. You're not waiting for something to begin. You're standing in the middle of something that doesn't look like it has started yet. And if you stay attached to how you think it should appear, you'll do exactly what people have always done in these moments. You'll overlook what doesn't match your expectation and miss what was actually meant for you. Let's break this down properly, because what's tripping you up isn't a lack of opportunity. It's the way you've been trained to recognize it. You've been conditioned, slowly and repeatedly, to believe that when something meaningful enters your life, it will feel different immediately. There will be a signal, a shift in energy, a sense of clarity that tells you this is important. You expect that internal confirmation, that instant knowing where everything just clicks into place. You think you'll feel it, recognize it, and respond accordingly without hesitation. But real life doesn't operate on that kind of clarity, because the moments that actually change your direction don't walk in wearing labels. They don't introduce themselves as turning points. Most of the time, they arrive in forms that feel small, almost forgettable. A conversation that seems routine, a task that feels slightly inconvenient, a situation that doesn't align with what you were hoping for. So, you mentally downgrade it before it even unfolds. There's no dramatic music, no internal alarm telling you to pay attention. If anything, it feels like something you could easily postpone, rush through, or ignore altogether. And that's exactly why these moments work the way they do. Because if everything important came clearly marked, if every opportunity, every shift, every connection announced itself up front, you wouldn't need awareness. You wouldn't need discernment. You would just react automatically. There would be no difference between someone who's paying attention and someone who isn't. Everyone would respond the same way. But that's not how it's set up. Instead, you're placed in situations where nothing tells you what matters in real time. There's no clear distinction between what's ordinary and what's significant. Everything looks the same on the surface. And in that environment, your ability to stay present, to engage fully, to not dismiss something too quickly, that becomes the deciding factor. Not effort, not intention, but awareness in moments that don't announce themselves as important. And now, your awareness, not your effort, becomes the deciding factor. That's the shift most people never make. And it's exactly where they fail without even realizing it. They're not lacking discipline. They're not lacking desire. They're just waiting for clarity before they decide to show up fully. In their mind, it makes sense. Once I know this matters, then I'll give it my full attention. But that logic is flawed in a way that quietly costs them real opportunities. Because by the time something becomes obviously important, by the time it proves itself, shows results, or reveals its value, the window to respond correctly has already passed. The first interaction is already behind you. The tone has already been set. The impression has already been formed. And those early moments, your presence, your attention, your level of engagement, those are not decided after you understand the situation. They are decided while you're still unaware of what you're dealing with. That's why this isn't about doing more. It's not about increasing effort or forcing intensity into everything you do. It's about how you show up in moments that don't look important yet. Let's make that even clearer. There are generally two types of people in these situations. The first type moves through life on autopilot. They instantly categorize everything. Important, not important, later, ignore. If something doesn't immediately stand out, if it doesn't demand attention or feel urgent, it gets pushed aside almost automatically. Their engagement is conditional. They wait for a reason to care. The second type moves differently. They don't rush to categorize. They don't assume they understand a moment within the first few seconds. Instead, they observe. They stay present. Not in every single situation, but in the ones that carry even a slight sense of difference, even if they can't logically explain it. And because of that, they catch things others completely miss. They recognize value early, before it becomes obvious. They respond with intention instead of habit. They engage fully before the moment proves itself worthy of that attention. And from the outside, it looks like their life shifts faster, like things just work out for them more often. But it's not luck, and it's not talent. It's the fact that they don't wait for confirmation before they decide to show up correctly. Now, bring this back to you. Right now, you're in a phase where everything feels flat, predictable, unchanged. There's no strong signal telling you that anything meaningful is about to happen. And because of that, your guard is naturally down. You're not expecting anything significant to enter your life in this environment. Means if something does show up quietly, if something actually begins in a subtle, unremarkable way, you're at risk of treating it exactly like everything else around you. And that's the real warning here. Not that something dramatic is coming, not that your life is about to be interrupted in some obvious way, but that something subtle is about to matter. And you're not currently prepared to recognize it in that form, because you're still looking for something bigger. You're still waiting for something that clearly separates itself from everything else. Something that feels undeniably different the moment it appears. But what if it doesn't? What if the next important interaction in your life feels like a completely normal conversation? What if it looks like a random introduction, something that doesn't seem connected to anything you've been waiting for? What if it feels so ordinary that your instinct is to stay half engaged, to not fully invest your attention because it doesn't seem important yet? That's exactly where everything changes, because the outcome doesn't depend on the moment itself. It depends on how you show up in it. The same moment, experienced by two different people, can lead to completely different results based on nothing more than their level of presence and awareness. Most people never fully understand this. They hold on to the idea that if something is meant for me, it will happen automatically. No, but that's not how it works. What's meant for you may enter your life, but how it unfolds, whether it grows into something meaningful or fades out unnoticed, still depends on your awareness, on your presence, on your ability to recognize the weight of something before it proves itself. And that's the part nobody really talks about, because it's much easier to believe that everything important will be obvious, that you won't miss what's meant for you. But the reality is, if you keep operating with that assumption, you will continue overlooking moments that didn't match your expectation. So what do you actually do with this? You don't overanalyze every interaction. You don't force meaning into everything or try to treat every moment as if it's life-changing. That's not the answer. The shift is actually simpler than that, but harder to maintain consistently. You stay present. Not intensely, not in a way that drains you, but intentionally. You listen fully instead of partially. You respond thoughtfully instead of automatically. You observe without rushing to label something as irrelevant too quickly. You stop treating moments like placeholders, things to get through until something better comes along, and start treating them as if they might carry weight, even if you don't see it yet. Because that's exactly how these shifts enter your life. Quietly, normally, without hint. And then later, when everything begins to connect, when the outcome starts to unfold and you can finally see the significance, you look back and realize that was the moment. But by then, it's either something you built into because you showed up correctly when it mattered, or it's something you lost because you didn't recognize it in time. There's no replay, no second chance at a first impression, no opportunity to go back and respond differently. That's why preparation right now matters, but not in the way you might think. Not external preparation, not doing more, not trying to force progress. Internal preparation. Your awareness, your presence, your willingness to treat what feels ordinary with a different level of attention. Because the meeting you're waiting for isn't going to arrive as an obvious turning point. It's going to show up as something you could easily overlook. And in that moment, there will be no announcement, no signal, no confirmation telling you this is important. There will only be a choice, quiet, almost invisible, to engage or to dismiss, to be present or to be distracted, to recognize potential or to ignore it because it doesn't feel significant yet. And that choice, small as it seems, will decide more than you think. So don't wait for something big to show up before you take things seriously. Pay attention to what feels normal, because that's exactly where this shift is going to enter. Not loudly, not dramatically, but precisely. And when it does, it won't ask you if you're ready. It will simply show up. And in that moment, the only question that will matter is whether you were paying attention or not.